This is Duke University.
So good afternoon and welcome to everyone. Thanks for joining us in today's conversation on interpreting in ASL. My colleague, Melissa Simmermeyer, and I are happy to see you here today. And we would like to take a moment to thank our sponsors that have made possible this event: the Forum for Scholars and Publics, Duke Service Learning, and the David Paletz Innovative Teaching Fund.
Our experts today, Brian Tipton and Kevin Pérez, will share what their path to becoming an ASL interpreter has been. We'll address some of the most common myths around sign language interpretation, and we'll talk about the challenges and rewards that they experience as interpreters.
Brian Tipton has been an American Sign Language interpreter for the last 18 years. He achieved his national certification from the Register of Interpreters for the Deaf in 2008 and interprets in a variety of environments on a regular basis, including education, medical, mental health, court, and government contexts.
And Kevin Pérez is a nationally certified American Sign Language, ASL, interpreter. He was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, and also lived in the Dominican Republic for a time. Kevin has worked not only as a spoken language interpreter, English to Spanish, but also as an ASL interpreter in a variety of settings such as legal, educational, mental health, and medical domains. Kevin also works as a trilingual interpreter in a video relay setting, VRS, as well as freelance trilingual interpreter in the community. So the plan today, Brian and Kevin will present for about 40 minutes. Then we will have 20 minutes for the Q&A. I encourage you to drop the questions in the chat, and Joan and I will curate them and pose them to our presenters. Well, we don't want to take up any more valuable time, so please join us in welcoming our experts today, Brian Tipton and Kevin Pérez.
So the first thing that we have to teach you is deaf applause, and that's if you move your hands like this. So that's the first sign that everybody's going to learn, right? So I guess we'll go ahead and do introductions. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So thank you so much. Both Kevin and I are super excited. And as you heard all of Kevin's accomplishments and the fact that he's a trilingual interpreter, I'm just amazed that I have the opportunity to present with him. And honestly, we're very excited to have this chat with you all. Both Kevin and I have been in the field for about the same amount of time. And we both remember when we were still in the beginning stages of the profession. So hopefully we're able to impart some minor gold nuggets of knowledge to help you be successful if you decide to pursue a career in interpreting, and hopefully avoid some of the mistakes that we've made along the way. So my name is Brian Tipton. I've been a sign language interpreter for about 18 years. I've been certified by our certification body called the Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf for about 13 of those years. My interpreting journey has taken me into many different scenarios. I'll go into a little more detail over the next 40 minutes. But I definitely have some more stories that would keep any party interesting. Some of the things that both Kevin and I have learned over the years have definitely been story-worthy, obviously with privacy and confidentiality a top priority. I have a beautiful wife, 6-year-old son. Both of them enjoy learning sign language, although they're not fluent in the language, but we enjoy sitting around the table and learning different signs for different things. My wife is a real estate agent, and she's very supportive. Oftentimes I have to go out of town overnight for an interpreting assignment or away for the weekend for an interpreting assignment, and she always holds the fort down, and I'm very appreciative of such a supporting partner in my life. I have 2 dogs and a cat. I love board games. I'm a huge Star Trek fan, so you could call me a nerd, and I love a good cigar. So that's a little bit about me.
Okay, I guess it's my turn, right, Brian?
Yep.
Yes, as Melissa already gave you my introduction, like she said, I was born and raised in Brooklyn. Initially, how I got started in ASL interpretation. Well, let me start back with Spanish interpretation. Both my parents are Dominican, so I, of course, had the language right there. My parents' friends, family members would come over and I needed to interpret at a young age, and that's what I did. Pretty interesting, pretty fun. as far as ASL, a good friend of mine introduced me to the deaf community. He knew sign language because a deaf man was teaching him ASL, and he was helping the deaf man learn a little bit about the Bible. And that was initially my main focus, is to learn sign language to help deaf people about to learn about the Bible. As I was in the community, as I was working with them, one individual, a deaf friend of mine, told me, "Kevin, I need your help." And I said, "Yeah, what do you need?" "I have a 3-day orientation that I need you to interpret for." And I'm like, 3-day orientation? Okay, are you sure? "Yeah, I'm already hired, but I need to get a sign language interpreter. They told me I need to bring my own interpreter." So that's how I got my feet wet. And as the years went by, that was happening more and more often. Usually after an interpretation assignment, you always want to ask yourself, did anybody get hurt? Well, he's still there after 23, 24 years. He's still working at that job. So hopefully he didn't get hurt too bad. But then after a while, I started noticing that I'm doing a lot of, which I didn't mind, pro bono work. But at the same time, it's a very flexible schedule. It's a very enjoyable profession. So I continue developing my skills in New York City. As I continue doing that, I contacted different agencies, and I started working, first of all, as ASL to English, then Spanish to English. And after a while, I got involved with the Trilingual, which I will delve into that a little later on. But that's my intro, and that's how I started with how I became an interpreter.
So I actually got started a little bit different. When I entered the interpreting profession, I was attending a small college in Knoxville, Tennessee. And when I was there, when I arrived on campus, I met a few deaf friends through a service project. And of course, the language is fascinating. Anytime you see somebody moving their hands, you're automatically drawn to that. And so I quickly jumped in and started learning the language. And a few years later, I started interpreting for some college classes. I can't imagine looking back on those days. That was 17, 18 years ago. I can't believe that deaf student actually passed those classes with as green as I was in the field. But that's how I started. After I graduated with my bachelor's, I went ahead and got my master's degree. And while I was getting my master's degree, I had several deaf friends who told me that I should apply for an educational interpreter position job with the Knox County Public School System. So I went ahead and applied. Thankfully, I got that position. But after the first year of doing that, I realized that I was in way over my head. I did not have any professional training. And so trying to be a professional interpreter while having a degree that's totally unrelated was something that was incredibly difficult. So I jumped into the University of Tennessee's immersion program for 2 months during the summer of 2006. And it's basically 2 months, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week of full immersion training where you're learning the language, you're learning how to be a professional interpreter. And that helped me really get on the path of developing myself professionally. For my first interpreting job, I didn't make a lot of money, but it was more than I was making as a waiter at Cracker Barrel. And so I was super happy with it. I moved to Raleigh, North Carolina a few years later and started freelancing, community interpreting, doing different events. I jumped into mental health interpreting. I started interpreting for court cases. And that's pretty much what I do today. From day to day, I will jump from a child protective services case in the morning to interpreting for a doctor's appointment in the afternoon, maybe a college class in the evening. So I really have a variety of different things that I interpret for.
Very good. So as far as how to become an ASL interpreter or Spanish and English interpreter, let's start with the Spanish and English. Spanish and English, we understand that there are many interpreter training programs out there. You need a base. You need to acquire language. You also not only need to learn the language, but you need to learn the culture, which is very important because that's where a lot of the nuances, a lot of the information will be relayed. Throughout the United States, there are a lot of interpreter training programs. To get certified in the American Sign Language profession, it has changed. I was certified, I took the exam in 2008. The requirement was not a 4-year degree. It changed, which is fine, because when we are exposed, like Brian was saying, he's interpreting mental health, he's interpreting legal. So there's a lot of knowledge that an interpreter should have. So there's no reason why they shouldn't have certain skills or certain degrees to be able to perform their work effectively. So I've been certified, like Melissa mentioned, in 2009. Coders are COD, those are children of deaf adults. They're supposedly the cream of the crop, so to speak. They're the ones who have the language at an early age, similar to, say, for instance, me. Both my parents are Dominican, so obviously the household is not speaking English, they're speaking Spanish to me. Likewise, in a coder environment, or children, both parents are deaf, their native tongue, their mother tongue, will be ASL. Mentors, that's very important. To get a mentor, it's very important to try to find individuals who speak the language, speak Spanish. If you want to learn Spanish, go to someone who speaks Spanish. You don't want to go to someone who speaks English because you already know English, so you want to try to go to someone who speaks Spanish. Likewise, the deaf community. I told myself that I love my hearing friends, my English speaking or Spanish speaking friends, but at the same time, I need to get involved with the deaf community. I have roommates, I have friends who, you know, we were together, we're buddies, best friends. They're deaf because I told myself, this is the way I would like to acquire language, by being with them, because those are the ones who are the real teachers. As far as trilingual interpreting, how do I feel being a trilingual interpreter? It's interesting. I'm not going to lie to you. It can be very challenging because you're think about you have 3 different cultures that you have to sort of juggle. You have the American culture, you have the deaf culture, and then you have the Latino culture. A couple of situations that I've been in where the mother is the doctor's appointment. The mother is Latino, or she only speaks Spanish. The teenager only uses ASL, and the doctor, of course, only speaks English. So in that situation, what do you do? What can you do? How can you navigate that situation? Well, everyone, first of all, should be on the same playing field. You don't want to give one culture more credence or more respect than the other culture. So one situation that I found myself in, the doctor introduces himself and asks a question. What's your ailment? To the deaf teenager. Deaf teenager responds. But now in that situation, I have to pause it because now the mother has to know what's going on. So then I have to repeat the question that the doctor just said in Spanish to the mother, and I have to repeat the response that her son gave to the doctor in Spanish. But that's not the end of the situation. The mother might have some extra information that she wants to convey to the doctor. So now the mother has a rapport with the doctor or a conversation with the doctor. But wait a minute, the deaf son is standing there like, wait a minute, everyone's speaking, I'm not understanding. That's when trilingual interpretation comes into play. You have to explain the situation, sign for patient. I'm sorry, I'm just going to use my hands every now and then. That way you guys can pick up some signs here and there. But you have to explain the situation, patient, your mother had answered, she's speaking, and then I will interpret. So just give me some time. So those are some situations that you find yourself in, and you constantly have to navigate. You have to tell yourself after the assignment, like I mentioned before, did anybody get hurt? Did anyone lose a limb? Thankfully not, that's the main thing. Another situation that you might find yourself in, certain individuals, if you're born and raised in a Latin American country, then you come here to the United States. their sign language that's being used is different. It's not really ASL. I just found out yesterday they have Cuban Sign Language. So I'm just going to use that example. Someone who was born in Cuba, raised, and then came here. So now they're in a doctor's situation. What do? They're using a form of sign language, but American Sign Language, but it's not really sign language. So in that situation, using my background, they will mouth English words. No, they're going to mouth Spanish words because, of course, they was born and raised in Cuba. So that's where I got to rely more on that aspect. ASL, you have to put it to the side and focus more on, okay, he's saying Domingo. Everyone knows what Domingo means, right? Brian means Sunday. But anyway, we see that he'll say that, you catch that. Oh, that's what he means. He means Sunday. He's doing this, he's doing that. So that gives you a perspective and that helps you understand, okay, that's where they're coming from. And that's the nuances, that's the challenges. It's beneficial, it's satisfying because you think about many times the Hispanic community, unfortunately, they don't have an opportunity to express themselves, even to their own family members. 90% of children who are deaf, both parents who are hearing, the parents do not know American Sign Language. So you're the go-between. You're the one that you're in this situation and you're seeing like, oh, okay, now he's able to express himself. Brian mentioned he worked in mental health settings. That's another main issue that I worked in also. That's when they can express themselves to psychologists, psychiatrists, and that gives me the help that they need. So it's very rewarding. The Hispanic community and the trilingual, it's very challenging because of the different accents, different sign languages that they use. But at the same time, it can be very successful if you focus and put your mind to it.
So thank you so much, Kevin, for telling me the meaning of Domingo. I'm the one non-Spanish speaker in this group. So funny story, actually, Kevin and I got to know each other really well a few years ago because we did a lot of work for a video relay company. And the basic idea of video relay service is a deaf person, of course, can't use a regular telephone like all of us hearing people can. And so what they have to do is they have to use a webcam, for instance, or similar to a webcam, and they'll call in will pop up on their screen, and then we will have a headset on, and then with that headset we'll call the dentist, or we'll call for a pizza, or we'll call their mom, or whoever it may be, so that way they can actually have an American Sign Language. So I'm sitting in a cubicle here, and Kevin is sitting in a cubicle here, and I'm sitting here trying to interpret my way out in just regular English, and next door to me I hear Kevin, and it sounds like somebody speaking in tongues in the cubicle next to me. So it was definitely fun. We would always take our breaks together. It was a good time. So a few facts and myths that I wanted to go over real quick is something that Kevin mentioned earlier too, but who has to pay for an interpreter? A lot of times doctors and people who you work with are going to be like, oh, hey, are you the brother? Or maybe they'll ask the client, are you going to bring your spouse for you? And we go through that all the time. And of course, there are different laws, communication access for Spanish interpreters as our sign language interpreters. That covers us is the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so with the Americans with Disabilities Act, effective communication is required for covered entities. That doesn't always mean a sign language interpreter. Sometimes the individual who's receiving services from the doctor or whoever it may be may with a doctor. Maybe they don't want a sign language interpreter. Maybe captioning is an option. There's a little device called an Ubi Duo, which kind of looks like a texting machine that's connected like this. And one person types on one side and the words appear on the other side. The deaf person may prefer to lip read. There's a deaf friend that I have who actually prefers to take their computer to the doctor, their laptop, and they'll type on the laptop and then let the doctor respond by typing on the laptop. That way they can save that conversation in a Word document and have it for their records for later. So there are a lot of different ways to have effective communication, but the most important thing is to ask the individual, what is it that you need? What is it that you want? Because it is covered by the Americans with Disabilities Act. The most common places that you'll see sign language interpreters are maybe the court setting, medical setting, education. Those are the three main areas. But also if you're a business, according to the law, that has 15 or more employees, unless you can claim hardship, then you're required an interpreter for your deaf employees. And so we work in a lot of those situations. Something else that's covered by the law is companions. So for instance, if there's a deaf child, if there's a hearing child in school and he has deaf parents, then the school is required to provide an interpreter for those parents to make sure that they can stay up to date with their grades, with the progress of their child, all the information. Maybe there's a deaf husband or a deaf wife who has a hearing husband or a hearing wife. And if that hearing or that deaf husband or wife is in the hospital, or their partner is in the hospital, then the hospital is required to provide an interpreter to make sure that their partner can understand everything that's being said that's going on with that individual that's in the hospital. In the state of North Carolina, a community interpreter is required to be licensed. That's different than certification. That's something that's specific to North Carolina. There are two types of licenses. There's a provisional license and a full license. Provisional license is typically given to somebody who just graduated school. Maybe they're just getting their feet wet in the profession and they want to move up, and they typically have 3 to 5 years to work on their skills and to pass the certification test. That way they can get their full license eventually. Something else that Kevin alluded to is not universal that I get from a lot of people is if you go to England, you can sign with all the deaf people. And I have to inform them that no, actually British Sign Language is very American Sign Language. For example, the American alphabet in sign language uses one hand. The British alphabet in sign language is something that's totally different. I was actually able to when I was in my second year of college. And while I was there, there was a small pocket of deaf individuals that was on a I forget what you call it, but there were Catholic nuns that had came from America and had established this commune for deaf people, and they actually taught them American Sign Language. And so one of the cool features of that trip was I was able to communicate with the deaf and with the hearing who knew sign language there, because it actually was American Sign Language, even though they were speaking Spanish to me. So we could communicate in sign, but we had no clue what each other was saying whenever it came to the actual spoken language portion of it. So just a little tidbit of information, ASL is universal. Kevin, do you want to give your pointers?
Yeah, personal recommendations. I feel that try to do as much as you can, try to learn as much as you can in your profession, continue working hard, continue trying to look at every setting as a possibility to learn. What I usually do with the VRS setting, when I learn a new word from, say for instance, does anybody know what guapo means? G-U-A-P-O? You know, right? What does it mean? Okay, she did the sign Jackie Materia, yeah. Sign for beautiful, yeah. But now if you're speaking to someone who's Dominican, it doesn't mean that. It means something totally different. You know, it means upset, it means mad. So I'm not saying learn different accents or different dialects of the 18 or 19 different Latin American countries, but continue doing your work, especially in this area. There's over 80 million plus Mexicans throughout the world, but there's the majority in this area are coming from Mexico. So it behooves you to learn more of those expressions, because that way you'll be able to do a very successful interpretation. Brian?
So I actually just saw Jackie. Jackie and I didn't notice you there. How are you? We actually work together a lot for the press conferences. So very nice to have her in the audience. So a few recommendations that I have. Something that's true for Spanish interpreting as well as American Sign Language interpreting is be in the culture as much as possible. Something that really helped me in the beginning was I went to culture events. I hung out with deaf people. Kevin's talked a little about how he's had deaf roommates. He's had deaf friends. I would encourage anybody that has asked me to mentor them. I would say, hey, go out to eat with deaf people, hang out with deaf people, go to deaf parties, do everything that you can, learn the culture as much as possible, because you can learn as much as you can from a book or from a class. But the reality is you're really going to learn the language when you're with the people who actually speak or who actually sign that language. Second, be willing to accept feedback. Growth will only occur if you're willing to be fed and watered. And that's something that I've had to learn over the years. I'm quite a stubborn individual. And I've had to learn that I need to be open to learning from anyone, whether that be a new interpreter in the field to someone who's extremely experienced in the field. Sometimes I don't like the feedback that I get, but I always need to be open to receive that. And I always need to make sure that I myself get out of the way to be able to accept that feedback. Third thing that I would recommend is search for mentors. One of the highlights of my growth has been me meeting people who are willing to invest their time and invest their life in me as an interpreter and me as an individual as well. When I was first getting started, I was fortunate enough to be mentored by the former superintendent of the School for the Deaf in Tennessee, Ed Davis, who spent 3 years just teaching me how to interpret, teaching me about sign language. His wife was deaf. He would invite me over. We would have dinners together. We would talk about deaf culture. And he really was just an amazing mentor. Here in North Carolina, the Division of Services for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, they actually have an amazing mentor program where they'll pair an experienced interpreter with a new interpreter in an effort to get them their full license. I'm not sure if there's anything like that for Spanish interpreters, but something like that would definitely be extremely helpful if you can find it. So find as many mentors as possible. Number 4, work as hard as possible. In the beginning, I remember I worked as much as I could as an interpreter. I was a staff interpreter at the University of Tennessee for a while. So I would work from 8 to 5, interpreting for college students all day. And then I would leave that job and go to Sorenson Video Relay Service and work every evening from 5:30 to 10. And then I would get home, I would shove dinner down before going to bed. And maybe once or twice a week, I would get a phone call in the middle of the night, maybe 2 or 3 a.m., to go to the emergency room because there was a deaf person there and they needed an interpreter. And I definitely would not be able to do that now at my older age. But when I was 21, that was something that I was eager. I just worked, could books as you. I know that that's definitely a trite recommendation. I always who asked me what books that I would recommend is The Richest by George Clayson, and then Who Moved My Cheese by Spencer Johnson. Those are 2 books that aren't necessarily interpreting related, but are definitely life related. And they have definitely helped me personally and professionally. And then lastly, save as much money now as you can, because the reality is as an interpreter, as a community interpreter, whether you're a staff interpreter, whether you're a freelance interpreter, the reality is you go so fast in life that you forget to save money. A Roth IRA is something that I was able to set up as a young interpreter, and I've slowly invested in that. And that's something that I always emphasize with any new interpreter that I talk to, is save as much money as you can now, because the reality is the older that you get, the more you're going to have to put in to save more, and just kind of builds on itself. And I've been fortunate to do that, and I definitely recommend that for all of you as well. So I think we're ready for questions if you guys have any for us. Melissa and Joan?
We sure do. There are some really great questions here. The first one I see is from Catherine, and she's asking Kevin. She said, switching from English to Spanish is hard, or switching between spoken languages is hard, but she wants to know if it's difficult to switch between spoken language and sign language. That's a hard shift to make.
Not really spoken language and sign language. Just the fact that with ASL, everything is off the hands. So you're not really using your voice, you're using your hands. But like you mentioned, switching from English to Spanish, I find it very difficult, because sometimes I get confused. I'm like, wait a minute, what language I'm supposed to be in? Spanish or English? Oh, okay, yeah. So but to me personally, I don't know, Brian might have something different, but ASL, because it's more off the hand, so it's a different thought process, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would definitely agree. One of the beauties of American Sign Language that we don't have to do, or is that something that we don't have to do in comparison to Spanish language interpreters, is a Spanish language interpreter has to listen to it and then they have to pause and then speak, when as an American Sign Language interpreter, I can listen and sign at the same time. So that's I don't know that I would necessarily call it a benefit, but I would definitely say in that sense, it's harder to be a Spanish interpreter because you're trying to speak and listen at the same time. When American Sign Language is silent, essentially, you're just using your hands. And so I can continue to have that stream of sound in my ear, and I can continue to output my sign language at the same time. So I would definitely agree with that.
Next, we have more like a comment than a question from Jackie, that, by the way, is another excellent interpreter. And for our students, she's Jasmine's sister. And the comment that she has is that many years ago at a mental hospital in Raleigh, I had the opportunity to interpret precisely for the situation that Kevin is explaining between a Hispanic mom, a deaf child, and a doctor. So congratulations on being able to do that, both ASL and Spanish English interpretation.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Go ahead, Melissa.
Well, so the next question I see is from Anna, and Anna has a question for Kevin. She wanted to know, is the majority of your interpretation bilingual, or are most of your translation situations trilingual?
Right now, I do a lot of VRS. Primarily, that's because of the pandemic, mostly VRS. VRS, I don't know if you know, but just a little bit. It's video relay interpreting. It's Spanish to ASL. There's some situations, funny situations, where English will be involved, but when it's trilingual, the constant is Spanish, ASL. And you got to understand, when you're finger spelling English words, because ASL is American Sign Language. So most of my situations, I would say, is bilingual. And even in the community, most of them were ASL to English, things like of that nature.
Nice. The next question we have is about something that Brian was talking about, and Samantha wants to know if only one parent of a child is deaf, does the same law apply to providing an interpreter?
So yes, so the law covers if there's, it's called the companion, a covered companion. So if there's a parent of a child, it doesn't matter if the child is deaf or if the parent is deaf. If they're there to find information about that deaf individual, or I'm sorry, if they're about the hearing individual and they need access to that information, then typically the hospital or the court system or whoever it may be is required by law to provide that interpreter. So the answer would be yes.
So the next question comes from Alex. I think this is for both Brian and Kevin. And she asks, how have virtual meetings changed the way you do your jobs? That is, making sure clients can lip read and making sure hands are in frame.
So I do a lot of VRI interpreting. I am mainly a community interpreter. Kevin does a lot of video relay interpreting. So we're different in that sense. We're doing the same thing, just in different settings, basically. And VRI has made things very interesting, video remote interpreting. And that's basically where we're interpreting over a Zoom connection, or we're interpreting through Teams, or we're interpreting through WebEx. There's a variety of different platforms that are used based upon the client that you're working with. And one benefit is that with COVID, in-person interpreting is more difficult because everyone's wearing masks. And one feature of ASL is the grammar is actually in the body and on the face. So a lot of people will comment, for instance, with the press conference interpreters, and they'll say, "Oh my gosh, the press conference interpreters are so they're so all over the place. You can see that they're so excited, or they're so angry, or they're so happy. You can see it all over their face." So whenever everybody's wearing a mask, that's something that's very difficult to convey. You can still convey that, but it's more difficult. So through a Zoom platform, you can still have access to those features. The problem with doing it over a Zoom platform is, for instance, when I do mental health interpreting, a lot of times the individual, the client that I'm interpreting for, the deaf client, maybe he's meeting with a psychiatrist or they're meeting with a therapist. I can only see maybe this much of their body. And so, as I said, American Sign Language is literally at times a whole body language. And so I may catch what's on their face, but in a live setting, I may miss that their hand is doing something down here or their leg is doing something down here. And so as an interpreter, it's more difficult for me because I'm not getting those extraneous signals from the deaf individual. And so I really have to make sure that I'm focused in on the facial expression, I'm focused in on the language, and hoping that I don't miss an extraneous tidbit of information so that the doctor or the psychiatrist, whoever it is that I'm working with, can work with that individual effectively. So it's a little more stressful as a VRI interpreter rather than being in person. And I don't know if Kevin has any feedback about that.
No, I concur 100%. Yeah. Usually not every deaf person can read lips. I noticed that it's mentioned. So that's something that it's, you can get away with that or you cannot. But yeah, I agree with Brian mentions that it can be more challenging now with this setting.
I think the next question can be a follow-up. Mackenzie is asking Brian, but I think both of you can answer. How have technological developments over the years that you guys have been working as ASL interpreters have impacted your job?
So repeat the question, the
developments. Yeah. How have the technological developments impacted your job through the years?
Kevin has a lot of experience with the technological developments with the specific field that he works in.
Yeah, where it has affected it tremendously because before, especially let's say the Hispanic community, they did not have the ability to communicate with their parents, the ability to express themselves. Now they have an app, they can walk outside and call their mother inside and tell her, I want you to cook some chicken and rice tonight, okay? And this time don't burn it. So, different things like that nature, it's something that they can communicate. And it almost brings you to tears when someone's calling from, let's say, Mexico, and they're talking to their niece or nephew for the first time. They're like, wow, I didn't know you had this ability to say certain things, or it's amazing. And, they're always very appreciative and thankful for doing the work, but it's just something that, you put your heart into it and you want to help out.
So the biggest technological change happened around 2005. That's when video relay service was introduced to the deaf community. And that was a huge game changer because before that, I'm not sure if you all have heard of something called a TTY, but basically it's just a typewriter that a deaf person will put a phone on top of, and it sends out signals. And then there's someone who has a TTY on the other end, and they would type on this little typewriter and it would beep back and forth and the words would appear on the screen. And as you know, Spanish is a different language. American Sign Language is a different language as well. So English for a lot of deaf people is their second language. It's not their primary language. And so with them trying to communicate with their loved ones or with their parents or whoever it might be, whenever they were finally able to pull up that sign language interpreter on a screen and they were able to see what their parent or what their loved one or what their sibling was saying in American Sign Language, it had huge ripple effects across the deaf community. Of course, I mean, that's changing even more, as Kevin mentioned. Now they have an app. Before, they would have to sit in front of a TV. They would have a huge box on top of their TV with a camera. Now they can just use their phone. And it's kind of funny. And I'm sure Kevin has some funny stories, but I've had experiences as a video relay interpreter where the deaf person pops up and they're sitting there driving down the road in their car and they're signing away and you're sitting there trying to interpret for them and you're praying to God that they don't run off the road and crash while you're sitting there interpreting for their conversation. So yes, definitely some huge technological changes over the past, I would say 10 to 15 years.
So Kaya has a question about emotions, and she wants to know if you all feel that emotions are a big factor when interpreting for families, and also families in particular, and how do you handle the emotional challenges, or how do you handle your own emotions in those situations?
Kevin, you want to take a stab?
Yeah, emotions are a big factor because unfortunately you see the good and bad. It's you think about it, you now with the VRS, but even before, I think there's a question down the pipe as far as mental health and all that. CPS cases, you see that. So you try to decompress a little bit, try not to get too emotionally involved. The goal is to try to convey the message regardless. You don't want to hide anything. You don't want to add anything. And you just want to be almost neutral. I try to decompress it gets to the point where you try to forget certain things. And there's a lot of workshops. There's a workshop, this control and demand workshop that I've taken, things how you can just decompress, and you should have some type of outlet. I like working out, riding my bike. I went riding a bike before this. It was so windy though, but that's fine. But it's just something that you have to do. You have to do other things, because if you just do this, oh no, I can't believe it, there was abuse and this and that, you will get burnt out and you won't last too long in this profession.
Very true. One thing that we discuss a lot in our profession is something called vicarious trauma. And that's where you become a part of the experience that you're interpreting. I interpret for a lot of child protective services cases. And so oftentimes I'll see children, either deaf children or maybe hearing children with deaf adults. And I'll have to work with these caseworkers and explain scenarios and explain the laws, and I'll see things that can be difficult to deal with mentally, that can be difficult to deal with emotionally. And so as I know that Kevin's a big triathlete, I love to do CrossFit, and that's kind of my outlet. I will pick up that barbell and I'll lift it, and it kind of works that out. I also, as I mentioned earlier, have a great partner. My wife will discuss emotional issues with me, and she helps me out with that. Also, emotional issues can creep up into your interpreting. I remember last summer, whenever a lot of the protests, the Black Lives Matter protests were happening, I was asked to interpret for the governor whenever he was addressing that. And it was difficult for me because I'm a white male, and interpreting for a movement that has such meaning in our culture right now, I was sweating. I was almost in tears because I didn't feel like I could effectively do that job, especially with the fact that I'm a white male trying to represent this awesome movement. And so I really had to check myself and make sure that my emotions are in check, make sure that I'm mentally stable, and that's something that you have to do on a regular basis. And it's an ongoing struggle as an interpreter, most definitely.
Wow. Next question. I think Brian addressed a little bit when you talked about masks, but Alexi wants to know how has the pandemic impacted or complicated your interpretation work? Do you have more work, less work? Is different?
I'll answer that briefly. Yeah, it has less work because March 20th, 2020 was my last freelance assignment. I have not been out. I've been here My wife has me prisoner here, but that's fine. I'm home, but a good thing I have VRS. So then I'm just focusing on VRS. I don't go outside freelance. I don't do doctors, CPS. I haven't done any of that stuff. And yeah, it has affected considerably. But like Brian said, it's good to save and all that good stuff.
Yeah. So March 20th, that was a huge date for us as interpreters. There were a lot of questions. For example, I had a 3-week assignment that went from March 20th all the way to the second week of April. That whole assignment was canceled. And so as a freelance interpreter, you live and you die on your individual assignments. I mean, your income comes from the actual work that you do. I don't work on a salary. I do the work and I get paid. And so I remember that assignment canceling, and we were so nervous about what was going to happen. And for the whole month of April, I had very, very little work. I did have some. And then about May or June, the work started picking up a little bit. People started creeping back to the doctor to have regular doctor's visits. There were a few surgeries that I would interpret for here and there. People were starting to deal with more mental health issues. And so there were more therapy appointments with deaf people, but it was very slow. And from, I would say, April to August, it's been the slowest experience that I've ever had as an interpreter. Thankfully, as I mentioned earlier, I've been able to save money and have that emergency fund ready. So whenever that hit, I was able to depend upon my emergency fund. And then around September or October, things really started picking back up. And since then, things have it's not back to normal, most definitely, but things have kind of gotten back to where they were before the pandemic, as far as the amount of workload that I have.
I'm going to have to skip some questions because we don't have a lot of time, but I'm going to ask this one from Takira. And she wants to know, like, in terms of respecting culture and relationships of power. So for Kevin, do you find you have to make decisions on whom to interpret for first? Do you do the mother, since she's the guardian, or the child who's the patient, or the provider? And she says, does the child ever ask you to leave out interpretations? So do you have to make decisions about sort of who's running the show?
To a certain degree, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Takira. Usually in certain settings, the doctor depends on the child, because it's kind of difficult to go to the doctor's office and ask the mother, how does he feel? Depending if the child is 15, 16 years old, because the mother says, yeah, I think he's in pain all day, every day. And then it's like, wait a minute, I'm not in pain. I'm in pain an hour a day. That's it. So you try to give that respect to the deaf person, because I noticed they're the ones, it's easy for them to be left out, because we all get into this habit. We're creatures of habit. So once we start talking, all of a sudden we can forget the deaf person. And that's not fair, because that person is supposedly the main one because you can hear certain things. If the mother knows a little bit of English, you can pick up some certain things. But it's, like I said, it's a juggling act. You try to give everybody their fair share, their fair time. But the most important thing is you don't want to leave anybody out. Sometimes the deaf person will say, leave this out, or even the doctor, or even, and you're like, we have a code of ethics that we can't do that. I let them know, whatever I hear, I'm going to interpret, if you're going to call him whatever, I'm going to say that. I can't hide anything, because I have to follow a code of ethics.
So something that's discussed a lot in our field is power, privilege, and oppression. And as an interpreter, we have an immense amount of power. And recognizing that and keeping that power in check is something that has to be done. And thankfully, the Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf has incorporated power, privilege, and oppression into our CEU, so that we're actually required to take classes on that, because oftentimes it's maybe something that we don't want to learn, but we need to at times. And so being willing and always, checking our power is something that definitely needs to be a constant focus.
Okay, I'm also going to skip some, and if we have time, we'll come back to those. Anna asks, how do you see the deaf culture differ from across the United States? And particularly, Kevin, how do you see the differs between the United States and the Latino countries? And how do you prepare and adjust to it?
You want to take that, Brian, first, and then?
Sure. Deaf culture is different from hearing culture, if I understand the question right, in that deaf people have been oppressed over the years. A lot of deaf people are told that sign language is inferior. They're encouraged to lip read. One of the most common questions that I get as an interpreter to interpret to the deaf person is, hey, can you read lips? And in a lot of instances, that's kind of an offensive question, because if the deaf person wanted to lip read, then that would have been the mode of communication they would have chosen. So asking a deaf person, can they lip read when an interpreter is standing right there? Well, yeah, maybe I can, but I prefer to use an interpreter. So please, let's go ahead with this conversation. So a culture of oppression is something that's really big that we have to be really sensitive to. Also, we have to be an ally as much as possible to the deaf community. And something else that we have to remember is I'm not just there as an interpreter, I'm a part of their community. So respect for the community, taking part in their culture events, doing as much as I can to support them, doing pro bono work where it's appropriate, supporting the deaf community. It's not just about me going in and coming out as an interpreter, but it's me as an ally. It's me as a deaf community member. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Kevin.
Yeah, the beauty with deaf culture here in the United States, it's the accessibility. Now, over the years, there's been more access to interpreters, been more access to education, and ASL, many deaf people, like Brian mentioned, they feel that they view them as inferior, but they're not. They're very smart individuals. And as far as the differences, the deaf culture here understands those rights, understands, hey, wait a minute, I have a right for an interpreter, and I'm going to stomp my feet and get an interpreter. And it has happened, have interpreters for 24 hours if you're at a hospital. But the deaf individuals in other Latin American countries is a little different, because there's no, how can I say this? There's not a lot of opportunities to educate themselves, not a lot of opportunities to express themselves, because there's no interpretation. They rely on the family members. And the family members, you know, we love our family members, but we have to be honest, they probably are not going to do the job of an interpreter, just relay everything that you're saying. They're going to feel that, okay, this is what he needs to know, and the other extra stuff, I'm going to keep it to myself, which is very unfair. So there is a power struggle. There is when the other deaf individuals come from other Latin American countries, they still like, okay, is it okay to say something? And, you know, your goal is to encourage them. Like, no, you can speak. I'm your voice. And I keep telling Hispanics talk too, also same thing. Whatever question you have, tell me. I'm not afraid. I'm from New York City, Brooklyn. I'm not afraid of anybody. I will speak my mind, but that's going to be you. That's not going to be me. So you just let them know that.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So Jackie made a comment that Katie, I think that's how you say it, the Carolina Association of Translators and Interpreters has a mentoring program called Learning the Ropes. And so the mentoring is important, I think, for all interpreters. And then Takira had a request. I think, Brian, that your internet froze up a little bit, or the Zoom did. So she wondered if you'd be willing to repeat the names of the books that you recommended.
So yeah, Kevin let me know that it froze a little bit. I didn't know which portion was missed. So the two books that I like to recommend are more life books. They're not necessarily interpreting books, but The Richest Man in Babylon by George Clayson, and then Who Moved My Cheese by Spencer Johnson. Those are two books that are in parable format, so they're easy reads. They're both really short, but they've had a huge impact on me professionally, personally. I have a stack of them that I give to my friends. One deals with investing and preparing for your future. The other has to deal with life situations and how somebody moves your cheese and how do you deal with that. So those are the two books that I like to recommend.
Okay. Emma wants to know, when you have interpreted for legal or social service cases for children of deaf parents, do you see bias against deaf parents' ability to parent?
You can, but understand that it's not only against deaf parents who have hearing children, but it's against deaf people in general. So I'll see bias in the courtroom setting. I'll see bias at the hospital. I'll go into and again, this doesn't happen all the time, but I'll go into a doctor's appointment and the doctor will turn and start talking to me, completely ignoring the deaf person. And I have to politely point the doctor to the deaf person that's sitting over in the room and just kindly remind him that this is the patient, I'm not the patient. And please, if you would, direct your comments to them. So yes, there is, but also I have a lot of respect for the social workers and the caseworkers who work with these deaf parents. There's definitely less bias, I would say, in the social work system than there is in others. Just from my own personal experience, I'm sure that there are examples of bias, but a lot of times the social workers, they've seen it all. And so their goal is just to help the parents improve their relationship with their kids. And a lot of times the deaf parents maybe just don't know. And so having someone there to kind of guide them and teach them is definitely integral to helping them become better parents.
So this question is for Kevin and Brian. I think we'll probably have maybe one or two more questions. It's from Andrew, and he wants to know, how do you express emphasis or sarcasm when translating or interpreting an ASL? And so when people emphasize certain parts of a story or use verbal clues or inflection to indicate that something particularly important is about to be said. So how do you get that across in ASL? Sarcasm or emphasis?
Sarcasm, that's a hard one. It depends on the story. It's sign language, 90% is facial expression. So you there's certain signs you can use, depends on the situation. You can have your eyebrows a little up, or you can mimic, just do certain movements with your body and to express what the speaker is trying to convey. So that's my tidbit on that. I don't know if Brian has a little more.
So language, I'm sure you've learned that language is not just one word in Spanish for one word in English. There's so much more to that than just exchanging two words. And so there's all the grammar, there's all the idioms, there's all the meanings between whatever the English phrase is compared to what the phrase that needs to come out in ASL. And so facial expression, body language, all of that is incorporated in trying to convey whatever that sarcastic term or phrase is. Also in English, there are idioms. And sometimes idioms don't translate well into another language. And so trying to figure out the meaning of the idiom and then just do a literal translation into whatever language it is that you're interpreting, in my case, American Sign Language, that's something that we have to do as well. But a lot of the more common idioms or the more common sarcastic phrases we've done in the past. And so we in an essence, have a good but not perfect translation for that idiom or that sarcastic phrase, whatever it may be. But as Kevin said, it's all on the face. It's all here. So if someone's being sarcastic, you'll see eyebrows raised, you'll see a mouth in a certain position. The grammar is typically all on the face. It's not just signs.
Okay, do we do one more?
Let's do one more, Joan.
Okay, I'm going to choose something, I don't know, lighter or not, but it's related to something we've done in class. So we've been translating graphic novels, okay? So And in those graphic novels, there are a lot of sounds and onomatopoeias. So do you interpret onomatopoeias in sign language?
Kevin, you want to
Let
take a
Brian
stab?
handle that one.
Yeah. So if I'm interpreting and I run into a word that I don't know, then typically I'll fingerspell it. I'm assuming it's the same when translating from Spanish to English or English to Spanish. If there's a word that the translator or the interpreter doesn't know, then they'll say it in the source language, or they'll spell it in the source language. And then a lot of times I'll leave it upon the deaf person to say, excuse me, what is the meaning of onomatopoeia? And then I get to interpret and translate the explanation for what the word means. If it's a more common word that's not quite as complicated as onomatopoeia, I don't even know if I'm saying that right. But if it's if it's a more common big word that we hear often, then typically there's a sign or there's a phrase of signs that we can use in its place. And so that's typically how I'll handle a situation like that. Kevin, I don't know if you're any different.
Yeah, similar. Basically, when you look at that word, it's sound. So in sign language, of course, there is no sound, but you can imitate that. Like, say for instance, a bomb, you can use make, for instance, that a bomb is going off and things of that nature, or different things like that. So that's one way you can interpret that word. But at the same time, like Brian mentions, if you don't know a word, or like there's not one word in English and there's a sign for that word. There's so much, there's like a backstory. You can tell a story, and you can have one person, and then you can have a car right there, and that person goes to the car. So it's different things you can do. And that's one way of trying to interpret those things.
That's wonderful. Well, let's give a big round of applause for our wonderful speakers today. We all learned a lot, I think, and we really want to thank you for joining us today.
Produced by Duke University, online at duke.edu.